Western political philosophy rests on a hidden fracture. Our system of governance relies on a carefully drawn division in how we define human life itself. The ancient Greeks used two terms for life. Zoe is the simple biological fact of living. Bios is a politically qualified life within a society. In classical antiquity, bare biological survival, Zoe, was confined to the private home and actively excluded from the public sphere. The Greeks had no single overarching word for life as we use it today, because combining biological existence and political existence was conceptually impossible. This original separation established the political realm as a sphere defined entirely by the kind of life it pushes out. Centuries later, the theorist Michel Foucault identified a crucial rupture in this ancient framework, which he called the threshold of biological modernity. Foucault argued that humans are no longer defined simply by a capacity for politics. In the modern era, our politics actively calculate and manage our existence as living beings. Here, biopolitics emerges. State power shifted its primary focus from defending territorial borders to actively monitoring population health, tracking birth rates, and enforcing public hygiene. The catalyst for this shift arrived during the 18th century, when newly formed republics drafted sweeping declarations of rights. By anchoring rights to the natural life of the individual, these declarations gave the state a new, direct mandate. Biological survival, Zoe, became the very ground upon which the law operates. This inclusion forces the state to constantly measure and categorize the life it protects. It must determine, with scientific and legal precision, which biological states constitute a citizen and which do not. Consequently, the legal tools used to secure human freedom also created the framework for the state to manage human existence at a biological level. To understand how a state exerts this control, we examine the mechanics of the law itself. In the early 20th century, the political theorist Carl Schmitt formulated a defining rule of legal power. His core maxim states, "Sovereign is he who decides on the state of exception." The sovereign authority creates a topological paradox. They exist outside the normal juridical order, yet belong to it entirely, holding the unique power to suspend that order. The law establishes order by temporarily suspending its own rules to capture chaos within itself. This dynamic is called the relation of exception. It creates a condition of inclusive exclusion, where a person is included in the legal system solely through their exclusion from its protections. The law maintains its absolute grip on the individual precisely by withdrawing from them, abandoning them to the force of the state. The state of exception operates as the ultimate enforcement of legal power, relying on the fiction of its own absence to exert absolute control. The original blueprint for this kind of abandoned subject comes from an obscure figure in archaic Roman law, known as Homo Sacer, the sacred man. This figure was defined by a double exclusion. First, they were judged legally and religiously impure, meaning they were explicitly banned from being used in any ritual sacrifice. Second, Roman law decreed that anyone who killed Homo Sacer would not be condemned for homicide. Stripped of all protections, they existed in a localized void, abandoned entirely outside both human jurisdiction and divine law. This archaic figure maps directly onto the modern concept of bare life, a human existence unconditionally exposed to the capacity to be killed without it registering as a crime. Homo Sacer provides the original legal blueprint for modern political subjects who have been systematically stripped of their rights. To see exactly where sovereign power operates today, we look past the courtroom and into modern biomedical technology. In the 1970s, the legal case of Karen Quinlan embodied this modern zone of indistinction. After she fell into a deep coma, life support machinery separated her biological functioning, her anatomy and motion, from her legal personhood. Her comatose body entered a threshold where the strict biological definitions of life and death lost all empirical meaning. A sovereign legal decision in a courtroom ultimately dictated whether her biological functions would be allowed to continue. The modern hospital bed now acts as a biopolitical frontier, a space where bare life is completely captured, defined, and managed by the law. This aerial blueprint reveals the spatial arrangement of the 20th century concentration camp, allowing us to define its true nature through a biopolitical framework. The camp serves as the permanent, physical spatialization of the state of exception. It emerged from the collapse of the traditional nation-state formula, which relied on a functional, automatic link between a specific land, a legal order, and birth within that territory. When birth, meaning bare life, can no longer be automatically integrated into the state's legal order, the system fractures. The camp fills that fracture, functioning as a localization without order, a physical space where fact and law become entirely indistinguishable. Inside this absolute void of rights, the principle of totalitarian rule is realized. Everything becomes possible for the perpetrators overseeing the system. These bureaucrats functioned as the living embodiment of the sovereign's word as law, making the execution and the creation of rules the exact same act. The absolute horror of the camps occurred legally, possible only because the victims were completely stripped of their political status, denationalized and reduced to pure Zoe. The physical and legal architecture of the camp did not disappear with the fall of historical fascist regimes. Today, modern border zones, airport holding areas, and refugee facilities replicate this exact legal geometry. The modern stateless refugee is abandoned by the law, yet held perfectly within its grip as pure biological life. Modern democratic capitalist systems continuously produce new categories of bare life, using economic and social exclusion to sever populations from their political rights. As the state of exception becomes a standard mode of governance, the distance between the protected citizen and bare life begins to close. The legal thresholds used to manage refugees and the comatose are increasingly applicable to the general population. When life is increasingly reduced to its biological functions, the camp becomes the hidden paradigm of our political world, and the exception becomes the rule.